Welcome, guys. I'm Firas Khnaisser. I'm head of decisioning for Standard Life Aberdeen, and I'm also the chair of DMA Scotland. I'm going to be talking about data predominantly, and I know data could be a bit of a dull subject, but to make it less dull for you, let's think data as people. So when we're talking about data, we are actually talking about human beings. I'm the chair of DMA Scotland, and I run something called the Value of Data program, which is all about leveraging data to create better customer experiences and give better outcomes to customers. And that's what the DMA is really about. I mean, the DMA has been a customer champion for a number of years, whether they are lobbying or presenting best practice to the industry or creating events to celebrate the good work that's happening in the industry. But the DMA is really about customer and creating good customer outcomes, really. There's a term which is data is the new soil that I quite like. If you haven't read the book, there's this really good book by an author called David McCandless, which is called Information is Beautiful. He's also done another one called Knowledge is Beautiful. And he talks about data as the new soil. And it's really healthy to start examining some of these images that are kind of projected into our psyche, because all we've heard really in the news was more about data as the new oil. And that seems like a very passive kind of image where we extract something that has some kind of value out of the ground and jobs are good. But data is not really like that. It's not just about getting the data and identifying the data, but it's what you actually do with it. So the soil analogy becomes much more powerful in the sense that you could grow in it whatever you want to grow in whichever way that you want to grow. But it actually puts the onus back on you as a person, as a human being, to be able to do something and shape this data in the way that you need it. We'd assume that we're in an age where we're creating a very large digital footprint. Our data is all over the place. We give organizations that we interact with a lot of data, but we're surprised when sometimes they don't know who we are and they don't know what products we have with them. And, I come from Lebanon and I've come to the UK for a number of years. And I used to be surprised every time I'd apply for the visa application that they would ask me for all my information again and again and again. And I always wondered, well, what did they do with all of this data? And it does feel like that with organizations is we keep getting asked for more and more data, but why don't you know us by now? And why can't you give us the kind of experiences that we're looking for? Our internet existence is predominantly a lot of people trying to find out what we're looking at and chasing us all over. I have a bit of a sock addiction, so all I get is ads for socks wherever I go, which is a bit discomforting because that's not all I'm about. I mean, socks is an important part of me, but it's not everything I'm about. And it's just really, it becomes really annoying to be able to view all of this stuff. But there's this appetite, right, from organizations that we want more. There's this hunger for data. And, and you'd assume that this hunger of data implies that data has a value. So why is it so difficult then for organizations to actually attribute a value to data? One possible answer to that is our accounting principles are outdated. We are looking at accounting principles that reflect the industrial age, where we're very good at identifying tangible assets. So we're very good at knowing, how much a chair costs and how much a desk costs. But when we talk about ethereal things like data, then it kind of just gets lost in the balance sheet, really. And all that could happen from an accounting point of view is data's clubbed under something called goodwill. But on the other hand, we have very good examples like brand value, which is now on the balance sheet after it's fought, a hard battle. So it's important to make sure that data is valued as an asset as we kind of progress. So we have this real issue, and this is MC Hammer for you who don't know who MC Hammer is. Look him up. He has really cool pants. But other than that, he has a song called "Can't Touch This," right? And I really feel that, if you can't touch something and you can't assess its real value, then, why would you invest with it as an organization? And it's important to be able to answer these questions, to be able to progress with your strategy as an organization. These examples from the accounting world also reflect more industrial age thinking that we have kind of adopted and fallen into without really understanding why we've fallen into it. One of them is this idea of value chain. And in the good old days, all you had to do was come up with a good idea, find raw material, put things together as cheap as you can, and push them out to customers. And that seemed to work really as a model back in the day. And especially when you had very few companies doing that, you really didn't have a choice. If there was, one car, you take it, even if its color was black. But what's happened since then is this value chain has exploded. And Professor Chris Speed from the University of Edinburgh talks about value constellations, where we're not really able to attribute at which part in the value chain value is created or lost, but also the whole role between what was traditionally a producer and a consumer has changed. Because if I'm creating so much data, then I am not just a consumer, I am a producer. So if I'm a musician and I'm putting up videos on content on YouTube, I'm a content creator. So why am I not appreciated as being a producer and not only a consumer? Because this shifts the whole relationship into a space of co-creation between customers and organizations, and gives attribution back to content creation or production. We have very interesting moments that kind of come about every once in a while. Cambridge Analytica was one of these moments where people kind of who were on Facebook were shocked to see that their data was being used for means that they had not subscribed to, and they had not even known that their data would be used for political purposes. But we all learned in the media that was something that actually happens. Now, what happens in these moments is that we have a moment of reckoning on service. This kind of like take a look and have a think that how comfortable are we with this service? And that doesn't only touch on the notion of value, but it also touches on the notion of values. Is what are our values as individuals? And when we look at a service, we cannot just look at the value of a service without looking at these values. And that's really important to bear in mind as we kind of move into the modern day age. We see really heartwarming examples. This is an advert that Nike ran a couple of years ago now, and it's never been more pertinent than today with everything that's happening with Black Lives Matter around the world. But this is a quarterback for San Francisco 49ers called Kaepernick. And what he started doing is before every football game, he would kneel down on the ground and put one knee on the ground. And now the image of the knee on the ground has become ingrained in our psyche as well, on the back of Black Lives Matter, about the oppression and excessive violence against black populations in the US and around the world. Nike decided to take Kaepernick as an ambassador and made him the face of the brand. And this is a very controversial issue in the States. Well, it was at the time, and now it's a controversial issue around the world, which is very welcome. But Nike took a very bold approach to say that this is what we're about. We're about inclusion, and we're about championing these values and these kinds of people. And this really shows, and it's demonstrated that it really polarized the Nike customer base to people who became extremely loyal to Nike, but people who started really hating Nike. But if you look at the bottom line of what that actually achieved, Nike had a 5% increase in their stock value as a result of this one move. And this really gives us a valuable message that brands can no longer afford being vanilla. They cannot afford sitting on the fence much longer without being about something. We had another lovely moment here with the EU GDPR across Europe, and a lot of us had to go through the process of amending our ways as organizations to fit the EU GDPR. But it leaves me with a bit of a sadness that we kind of missed an opportunity to re-engage with customers correctly. So it felt that a lot of it was tick box exercises, and whereas it should have been a re-engagement opportunity between brands and their customers. One really good example is The Guardian, actually, and they won a gold award at the DMA Awards 2 years ago for this, which was a once in a lifetime award for GDPR, where they played on the whole Leave Remain campaign to get consent from their customer base. But what they did is they just positioned this whole repermissioning exercise as one step in a journey for The Guardian and its customers to allow more transparency and to give Guardian customers more power over their data and what they choose to do with it. Not only did The Guardian smash their repermissioning targets, but they actually managed to get customers into other services that they had not known for The Guardian. So this is profitable stuff, and it's very responsible. And The Guardian are not alone in this, but Guardian really shown as a very strong example of really going over and beyond what the legislation gives us, which is this is the bare minimum that you have to do. And this is really good practice in our opinion. Which brings us really swiftly to the topic of ethics and AI. The media's kind of completely overwhelmed with these topics, and it's actually quite surprising when you think about it that ethics is something that's discussed in the mainstream, and it's only a while back that I kind of clocked why are people really concerned about ethics. And the reason is because when we have regulation is what you must do. And with the pace of technology and things moving as quickly as they currently are, regulation cannot really keep up. So it's important to ask the question, and ethics helps us do that, is what should we do? And that puts the onus back on us and the organizations that we work for to really think about that, because the scale and pace of change that these technologies are providing with us are unprecedented in the history of humanity. And this, of course, could be something extremely positive. I mean, if you take a look at this diagram, it's from MIT Technology Review, and you'll take a look on the left-hand side, you've got all the big social problems that we are currently trying to address. And horizontally on the top, you've got all of the different techniques that AI provides and how AI will be able to feed into that. And the dark blue boxes over here show you that AI is able to make significant impact. The light blue is a bit less, and then the black ones is actually it doesn't. But it's really heartwarming when you just take a look at this image in its totality to see that the number of areas, the number of issues that we're trying to address as a society, and how AI could actually really make significant changes in this space. However, there's a flip side to this beautiful image, which where things could go horribly wrong, and we see examples, and we all watch Black Mirror, and we've seen episodes of how things could go horribly wrong. And one of the things is that we could lose our freedom, and that's a really scary thought. And we see in certain regimes, for example in China, where they're really upping the game on surveillance and facial recognition and all of these technologies. And if something goes wrong, then it's really hard to kind of go back. So if I get put in a pool of people who shouldn't have access to certain services, then I'm excluded. And if this pool of services includes my freedom, then I've actually lost access to my freedom, which is very scary. But it's the dark side of the image that I showed previously, which I think is important to show. We're also in a unique moment in our time here on this planet, where we're with COVID-19 and what that's actually putting into the fore, and not least is contact tracing and contact tracing technology. Now, if you don't know what contact tracing is, it's about apps that are on your phone that allow you to know if somebody who has COVID is within your vicinity, and a text would go out to you to alert you that this has happened. Now, obviously, this hinges on the fact that everybody downloads this app for it to be used effectively for general public health. Now, the tricky thing is for people to actually download it, then they need to have trust in the people providing them with this app, whether it's the companies that are running it or the government that's asking them to use this technology. Because it does come at a price at times, it feels, that we have to make a choice between our health and privacy. So at that, and that should not be the case when we're looking at innovation. They should actually come together, that one should not be compromised at the expense of the other. And we see, if we take a look at contact tracing across the world, there are so many different applications. Again, China has a much more heavy-handed approach to contact tracing. India has a heavy-handed approach. Other countries don't. But when you kind of look at it in its totality, there's a lot of personal, sensitive customer information that's over there that would not be utilized, not to the individual's benefit nor to society's benefit, if there is no trust. Black Lives Matters, again, a really powerful thing that I touched on earlier in the presentation, and I want to touch on again, because of algorithmic bias. And algorithms are being used widely in society today, whether it's credit scoring that we're very familiar with here in the UK, employment, education, but then it goes into policing, criminal justice, mental health, and various other aspects. There's a wonderful book that I really recommend that you read by Cathy O'Neill, which is called Weapons of Math's Destruction. And a few years ago, she's been talking and championing the fact that we are putting certain racial groups or certain groups in the society, irrelevant of race, it could be age, at jeopardy, just by us not really reflecting on the technologies that we're putting forward. And so it's really, really powerful in this moment in time when we're looking at the way the Black communities have been dealt with, that we really re-examine all of these technologies and the way that they're being put, not least from a policing point of view. And Cathy O'Neill actually has a wonderful example on how the distribution of the police in New York City is based on historical data, and actually it's based on a very racist approach of we will heavily put police officers in black neighborhoods across the city. Therefore, this is kind of passed on and it's fed into the algorithm, which means this kind of attitude and behavior is continued with us into the future, which is very dangerous. But then again, all of the kind of activism that's happening right now is causing really, really good sounds coming out of industry. So IBM came up with a really powerful statement by its CEO to say that they will not pursue surveillance and facial recognition technology, or in fact anything that puts infringes on basic human rights and puts people at risk in any way, shape or form. Now, this statement does not come at no cost. This is as a result of a lot of activism, a lot of awareness around the potential damage of all of these technologies and what they could have on our everyday life. So it's very welcome that the big tech companies are starting to make statements like that. And IBM were followed as well by a few other tech giants, which is a really healthy thing to kind of bring into the public sphere. If you want to have a bit of fun, just to see how biases work and algorithms work, MIT have something called Moral Machine, which is a game that they've devised to take a look at your innate biases. So basically, the premise of the game is there's this car that's going to crash. It could either crash into this bollard, or it could crash into people that are crossing the street. The people who are in the car have a certain makeup, and the people on the street have a different one. So for example, you could have somebody who is ill, or you could have somebody who's overweight, or you could have somebody who's a doctor, or you could have somebody who's a drug addict, or you could have somebody who's a child as opposed to somebody who's old. And then they play with all of these different scenarios, and you play a little game. I was really shocked when I started seeing the biases that I had, and these are biases that I've never clocked before. And that's on an individual basis. So I really invite you to do that. But what it really does is it really hammers the point that organizations, not individuals, there is an onus. Until legislation is in place, there is an onus and a responsibility on the actual individual to rise up to the responsibility wherever they sit in an organization. But for these big changes to happen, these ethics and these values have to permeate all functions. We were doing a very interesting workshop with a global client around ethics and ethical frameworks recently. And the first question they asked us is, who do we invite, which departments do we invite to the workshop from the company? Now that was a very insightful question, because actually for a company to adopt an ethical framework, then you need everybody from the company. You need literally every department to be represented, to understand what are the values of this company and how does it actually apply to their everyday job, whether it's services, propositions, products that they're actually developing. How do they embed this within the DNA? And the reason I'm kind of tapping into all of this stuff around values it's because we as a marketing industry are facing a big challenge, which is trust. And these are really tangible ways that we could start addressing the trust issue. This is where data becomes really, really exciting as an opportunity to properly engage with our customers. So the DMA is kind of founded on a reputation of something called the DMA code. So every member of the DMA has to go through an assessment. And the code is basically a code of practice that highlights best practice within the industry. So it talks about things like privacy, honesty and fairness, diligence with data, and taking a responsibility. And really this is about that. And we're really pushing the boundaries with the program that I told you I'm leading, which is the value of data, which is looking to leverage the value of data across all of society. And we're working in the public space and the private space with academia to really galvanize all the support required to create better engagement with customers, because we really believe that using data in a good way to engage with customers will have really powerful implications on society at large. So I invite you to visit the Value of Data site on the DMA website and join us on this movement to try to make things a little bit better for everyone, hopefully. Thank you very much, and I wish I could be with you in person. We've had to deliver this through this format. I hope you found this very insightful, and thank you very much.